You're having a moment, my friend.
I am. It's quite a bit shocking to be frank.
the the moment seeing your book and feeling your book for the first time. Talk about that.
You know, I've they compare bringing a book into the world as like they call it birthing your book, and I have 3 kids, so I totally get that analogy. It's one of those things where you think you understand what it's going to be like when you see your book for the first time, but when you actually hold it in your hands, like when I held it in my hands, um, I recorded it. I turned my phone on to record it because the writing community on social media and just fellow authors have been such a support for me in this journey. I learned to write on Twitter. So I wanted them to be a part of me experiencing that emotion. And so I remember setting the phone to record, not really sure what was going to happen. And then I unzipped the box, I opened it up, and I like started to try to speak, just a gush of tears and emotion, um, because there's just so much that goes into making a book. But when you write a book that's so deeply powerful and personal, it just, my eyes are watering again just thinking about it.
Mm. So tell me about the book. Give me a synopsis for those who don't know anything about it.
Sure. So Wings of Ebony is an urban fantasy novel, but it's very grounded in a contemporary setting. So contemporary readers are absolutely loving it. And it's about a Black teen from an inner city community who must lean into her ancestors' magic to protect her home from drugs, violence, and crime. It involves you teeter totter between the contemporary and the fantasy world, and it's very grounded fantasy too. It's very thrilling and fast paced. There are lots of laugh out loud, funny moments. There are good food descriptions. Being from the South, I had to, pay homage to my grandma and all the things she taught me in the kitchen. So it's a lot. It's a book of love, joy, and hope. And I don't think there's anything quite like it, to be honest.
Why the title Wings of Ebony?
So here's a funny, I'll let you in on a little writer secret here. A lot of books get retitled. A lot of writers can't name their books until they finish them. I can't write a book until I know the title, even if,
Why is that?
I haven't figured this out, but I suspect it's because the tone of the book comes to me in the title. Sort of the essence of the book comes to me in the title. And a lot of times they're just working titles. They're like, okay, this is good for now. And most of the time, except for one book that I've written, they've all stuck. So Wings of Ebony came to me when I was starting to write. And I love the imagery of wings for freedom and ebony for Black people. And I loved this book that encompassed like in the like narratively, but then also just as a story and sort of what it can do for my community as this sort of avenue to freedom, this sort of homage to our freedom and leaning into our magic. And there's something really powerful, I think, about the imagery of freedom and magic. So like as
Mm.
you lean into your power, sort of that is your freedom.
I wanted to be clear about something. So this was your first book, wasn't it?
This was the first young adult book I've ever written. I did try to write another book once, but again, I didn't know what I was doing. So it was an adult novel, and I just was sort of playing around. But no, this was the first young adult book that I've ever written. And
Yeah. Well, you got
yeah,
to crawl before you walk and run, right?
no, it's true. It's true in all things.
Mm. Um, the hero of your book, her name is Rue. She is defiant and stubborn. How did that character come to you?
Well, I've been known to be a little stubborn, so depends on who you ask. But a lot of Rue, I think, is there are pieces of Rue that are me. There are pieces of Rue that are people I've known, aunties, cousins, sisters, my family. There are pieces of Rue, I think, all over the Black community, all over marginalized communities, period, because of what she embodies. This sort of defiant optimism to believe that sort of the narrative about her community isn't the true story, and this burning desire to tell the true story about her community. And I say she is relentlessly fierce because she is relentlessly optimistic. The heart of her power is love.
Fantastic. The book is entertaining, but there's a message here. What message do you want this book to deliver to young Black girls in particular?
I love that question. That you are magic. The dedication in my book, which I will just read, it's very short, really hits home on this point. And it says, and for you, reader, there is an ember in you that's hungry to burn. That is your magic. Let it. And so the idea there to Black girls in particular is to lean into their heritage, to be inspired by where they come from, and not feel chained or limited by any sort of narrative in the world that they see about themselves, and to really define that for themselves.
Mm. At one time, you wanted to be a lawyer, a politician, a doctor. You ended up teaching for a while. Where did you get the courage to turn this corner?
You know, Rue was born out of this sort of this overwhelming sense of needing to tell this girl's story. I always loved words. I always loved to read. Reading is something I just always enjoyed. I was a journalism major in college, which is like its own form of storytelling. And I pursued other things, some that were more practical. At the time, I was a teacher because we moved around a lot because of my husband's job. And so teaching was something that I could get into fairly easily. I also really loved working with children, just their optimism and their energy. It was just incredibly inspiring. So writing was always there, sort of the undercurrent of my life. You know, books were always where I fled to. So when Rue came to me at 5 a.m. one morning, just as this girl standing over the sidewalk, like over this body, this bleeding body, and she felt incredibly emotional. She was very sad, and she felt powerless to stop whatever had happened to this person. This was in 2018, just to be clear. So well before 2020, which I think is a nod to just how ingrained these issues are in our community. And so I felt obligated to let this character speak and really let Rue guide me on the page for what she wanted to tell me and show me about her home. And I think that's what comes through. So I don't know that it was my courage. It was sort of, I felt like an obligation because Rue trusted me with her story. Rue had something to say. And I felt like, okay, I need to give it space on a page.
It's amazing to me that you formulate a character in your mind that speaks to you so powerfully that compels you to write a book.
You know, I believe that stories live within us, and they sort of are scratching at us saying, hey, pay attention to me. You know, I read a statistic once that some huge number, like 74% of people want to write a book someday. And so I do believe that just as people and as absorbers of stories, that we have stories within us that we feel like that we want to tell, even on a subliminal level. And Rue's story was definitely a product of that sort of buried frustration at the brutality of my community, the narrative so often mentioned about my community. I wanted to speak about the truth of my community, the love, the joy, and the power there, the magic there, and really talk to those kids' hearts, the kids that were like me, like my young sisters. So
So you're one of how many
I
children?
have 3 sisters. One is in college, and then 2 are in almost in high school. Well, you know,
Mhm.
like on the cusp, like that 8th to ninth grade transition.
Yeah, yeah, closer to Rue's age.
Yes, actually, yes, which is interesting because when I started writing Wings of Ebony, I would talk to them about Rue, and Rue was older than them then. And so, but now it's interesting because now that they have the book in their hands, they can relate to it in a different way, which is just so cool.
Um, Tell me about was it a tweet or a text uh, that you sent out that was like 40 some words so the publishers could get a sense of what this was about? Which was it?
It was a tweet.
It was a
Yes,
tweet.
I did basically a short summary of what my book was about.
Yeah. So I saw that, not very long. Um, Publishers started gaining interest in this. I think you said 23 publishers reacted. What did you
Oh,
think?
absolutely. Honestly, it shocked me. I'll never forget. It was early in the morning. I was on the West Coast. So and these tweet pitches started about 8 a.m. Eastern. So that's 5 a.m. when I was in California at the time. And so I woke up, I set my alarm for 4:58 and I tweeted. And I will never forget thinking, okay, let me just go back to sleep. Lynn, I never went back to sleep. I was up all day because my phone just started exploding with notifications. Friends who knew I was putting my tweet up were saying, "Are you seeing this? Oh my goodness, this person just responded. Oh my gosh, did you see what they said? Such and such retweeted it." And it just went on and on and on all day long. And that's when I knew, like, not only did I have a story to tell, but the world might be ready to listen, which honestly in hindsight is like, whoa, it was very deer in the headlights, but here we are.
Here we are. The actor Tom Hanks once said, "Be so good that they cannot ignore you." Isn't that what happened?
That's very flattering. Thank you. I love that you have read this book and enjoyed it. That means the world to me. And I think that there's a lot of truth in those words. I think the hard part in publishing is so much is perception and so much is subjective, and the industry doesn't always. Books like mine don't always make it through. But I've never seen a Black girl from the hood, and I use that term with so much pride, centered in a novel on the New York Times, other than Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give. I really saw a switch in 2017. And I'm just hoping that that just opens the door for more and more books like mine.